Most people aren't ready for what I'm about to share. Joel Goldsmith's final teaching remained hidden for decades because it challenged everything we believe about healing, manifestation, and spiritual power. This isn't another feel-good message. This teaching dissolved tumors, restored broken relationships, and created financial abundance for those brave enough to apply it. But it demands you abandon every spiritual concept you've held dear. Are you prepared to let go of prayer, meditation, and affirmation? The secret lies in what Goldsmith called the Great Nothingness. When you truly understand this principle, you stop trying to heal, manifest, or change anything. Instead, you discover the profound truth that transforms everything without effort. But I warn you, once you see this truth, there's no going back to struggling with problems. Your entire relationship with life will shift forever. Most people prefer their familiar suffering to this radical freedom. Goldsmith discovered this teaching during his darkest hour. Facing financial ruin and serious illness, every spiritual practice had failed him. Prayer brought no relief. Meditation offered no solutions. He was ready to abandon his spiritual path entirely. Then something extraordinary happened. In a moment of complete surrender, he stopped trying to heal himself. He stopped asking God for help. He stopped believing he had any problems at all. In that instant of absolute stillness, everything changed. The illness vanished. The financial crisis resolved. But more importantly, he realized the shocking truth. There was never anything wrong in the first place. The problem was his belief in problems. The struggle was his fight against what is. This revelation became his most guarded teaching because it destroys the spiritual marketplace. When you need nothing, seek nothing, and fix nothing, what is left to sell? Only the truth of your perfect, untouchable being. Here's what makes this teaching dangerous. It reveals that every spiritual technique you've learned is actually reinforcing the very problems you're trying to solve. When you pray for healing, you affirm sickness. When you visualize abundance, you confirm lack. Goldsmith called this the trap of spiritual materialism. We use God like a cosmic vending machine, feeding it prayers and expecting miracles. But divine consciousness doesn't work for you. It works as you. There's no separation to bridge. The moment you stop trying to demonstrate supply, health, or love, they naturally express as your experience. Not because you've earned them or manifested them, but because they are the very fabric of your being. You don't get love, you are love. This understanding eliminates all spiritual effort. No more techniques, no more struggling, no more waiting for results. Just the recognition of what you already are, perfect, whole, and lacking nothing whatsoever. The Great Nothingness isn't emptiness. It's the absence of all human concepts about God, life, and yourself. When you stop knowing what anything means, when you release every definition and belief, something miraculous emerges from the silence. Goldsmith taught that in this space of unknowing, divine intelligence operates freely. Without your mental interference, life organizes itself perfectly. Problems dissolve because there was no one there to have problems. Needs disappear because wholeness was never absent. This isn't positive thinking or denial. It's the recognition that the human sense of life, with its struggles, needs, and limitations, is simply not true. What you are is untouchable by human experience, forever free from all conditions. Most spiritual teachers won't share this because it ends the student-teacher relationship. When you realize you are already that which you seek, what is there left to learn? The search ends in the discovery of what never began. Sarah had been battling chronic fatigue for 15 years. She'd tried every healing modality, spent thousands on treatments, and exhausted herself pursuing wellness. When she heard about Goldsmith's teaching, she was skeptical but desperate enough to try anything. Instead of fighting her condition, she began practicing the Great Nothingness. Each morning she would sit quietly and release every thought about her illness, every hope for healing, every fear of staying sick. She stopped identifying as a sick person seeking health. Within weeks, something shifted, not the dramatic healing she'd expected, but a profound peace with her experience. She stopped monitoring symptoms and started living fully despite fatigue. Paradoxically, as she stopped trying to get well, her energy began returning naturally. After 3 months, she realized the fatigue was gone. But more importantly, she'd discovered something greater than health, the recognition that her true self had never been touched by any condition. She was free regardless of what the body experienced. Marcus was drowning in debt, working 3 jobs just to survive. He'd practiced visualization, affirmations, and abundance techniques for years with minimal results. The harder he tried to manifest money, the deeper his financial hole became. He was ready to give up on spirituality entirely. When he learned about Goldsmith's approach, it made no sense. Stop trying to demonstrate supply? Stop seeing himself as poor? How could that possibly help? But his desperation overcame his doubt, and he committed to this radical experiment. He began each day by releasing every thought about money, bills, and financial security. Instead of affirming abundance, he practiced recognizing that his true nature lacked nothing. He stopped identifying as someone who needed more money. The transformation was subtle but profound. New opportunities appeared effortlessly. People offered help without being asked. Within 6 months, his financial situation had completely reversed, not through struggle, but through the natural flow of good that emerges when we stop blocking it. Linda's marriage was failing. 25 years together seemed to be ending in bitter divorce. She'd tried counseling, prayer treatments, and relationship workshops. Nothing was working. Her husband had already moved out and filed papers. Desperate to save her marriage, she discovered Goldsmith's teaching about the Great Nothingness. Instead of praying for reconciliation or trying to change her husband, she began releasing every thought about the relationship, every hope for reunion, every fear of divorce. This felt like giving up, but she persisted. She stopped seeing herself as an abandoned wife and stopped identifying her husband as the enemy. She practiced recognizing the perfect spiritual being that both of them truly were, beneath all the human drama. Within 2 months, something miraculous happened. Her husband called, confused by a sudden shift in his feelings. The anger had dissolved, the desire for divorce had vanished. They reunited, not as the same broken couple, but as 2 people who'd rediscovered their true identity beyond all human roles. These transformations share one common element: the complete cessation of human effort. When Sarah stopped trying to heal, healing happened. When Marcus stopped chasing money, abundance flowed. When Linda stopped fighting for her marriage, love returned. This is the power of the Great Nothingness. It removes the human will that blocks divine action. Your struggling, seeking, and striving actually prevent the very experiences you desire. Divine consciousness can only operate in the absence of human interference. The moment you stop trying to be spiritual, you discover you already are. The moment you stop seeking God, you realize God is seeking through you. This teaching is dangerous because it destroys the entire spiritual industry built on human effort and divine separation. If these transformation stories inspire you, like this video to help others find these teachings, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment. What healing journey resonated most with you? Beyond the Great Nothingness lies what Goldsmith called divine indifference. This isn't cold detachment, but the recognition that your true self remains untouched by any human experience, positive or negative. You become indifferent to both problems and demonstrations. This divine indifference eliminates the emotional roller coaster of spiritual seeking. No more celebrating healings or mourning failures. No more feeling blessed when things go well or punished when they don't. You rest in the unchanging awareness that observes all experiences without being affected. When you achieve this state, miracles become natural. Not because you've earned them or deserved them, but because divine consciousness expresses itself freely without the interference of human desire or fear. Life flows effortlessly because you're not trying to direct it. Most people resist this teaching because they want to feel special about their demonstrations. They prefer the drama of problems and solutions to the peace of divine indifference. But true freedom lies in needing nothing, wanting nothing, and being satisfied with what is. Goldsmith taught that consciousness is the only power, but not personal consciousness. Divine consciousness expressing as individual awareness. When you stop trying to use your mind to change conditions, divine mind operates through you automatically. This principle revolutionizes prayer. Instead of asking God to change circumstances, you rest in the recognition that perfect consciousness is already expressing itself as your experience. There's nothing to fix because consciousness doesn't make mistakes. Every seeming problem is actually consciousness appearing in a form you don't recognize or approve of. The same divine intelligence that grows flowers and moves planets is orchestrating your life perfectly, even when it doesn't look perfect to human perception. The practice is simple but challenging. In every situation, instead of trying to make something happen, rest in the truth that consciousness is already handling everything perfectly. Your job isn't to heal, help, or improve, just to get out of the way. The third pillar of this teaching is spiritual discernment, the ability to distinguish between divine ideas and human concepts. Most of what we call problems are simply human interpretations of perfect divine activity that we don't understand. Sickness isn't divine consciousness expressing as illness. It's human consciousness misinterpreting divine activity as disease. Lack isn't God withholding good. It's human perception failing to recognize the abundance that's always present. When you develop spiritual discernment, you stop reacting to appearances and start recognizing the divine reality behind every experience. A financial loss becomes redirection toward greater good. An illness becomes an opportunity to discover your untouchable spiritual nature. This doesn't mean denying human experience or pretending problems don't exist. It means seeing through the human appearance to the divine reality that's actually taking place. Every challenge becomes a doorway to deeper spiritual understanding. The final technique Goldsmith shared was conscious union, the practice of recognizing your oneness with infinite consciousness in every moment. This isn't a meditation technique or visualization. It's a way of living from spiritual identity instead of human personality. Throughout your day, instead of identifying as a person having experiences, you recognize yourself as consciousness itself, expressing as individual awareness. You're not someone who has consciousness. You are consciousness appearing as someone. This shift in identity transforms everything. Problems can't exist because consciousness doesn't have problems. Needs disappear because consciousness lacks nothing. Fear vanishes because consciousness cannot be threatened by anything it creates. The practice is moment-by-moment recognition. I am not Sarah who is tired. I am consciousness expressing as perfect energy. I am not Marcus who needs money. I am consciousness expressing as infinite supply. I am not Linda seeking love. I am love itself. But let's address the elephant in the room. What happens when this teaching doesn't seem to work? When you practice the great nothingness and problems persist? When divine indifference feels like spiritual bypassing? When conscious union seems like self-deception? Goldsmith was honest about this challenge. The human mind is deeply conditioned to believe in separation, problems, and solutions. Years or decades of spiritual materialism don't disappear overnight. The ego will fight this teaching because it threatens its very existence. The key is persistence without attachment to results. You practice these principles not to get anything, but because they reveal what you already are. Some days will feel like profound breakthroughs. Others will feel like complete failure. Both are equally perfect expressions of consciousness. Remember, you're not trying to become spiritual. You're recognizing the spirituality that was never absent. This recognition sometimes feels clear and sometimes feels clouded, but the truth of your being remains unchanged regardless of how you feel about it. Another common obstacle is the fear of losing motivation. If you stop trying to improve your life, won't everything fall apart? If you become indifferent to outcomes, won't you become passive and irresponsible? This fear reveals a fundamental misunderstanding. Divine consciousness is infinitely more intelligent and effective than human effort. When you stop trying to control life, life begins operating at a level of perfection impossible for the human mind to achieve. You don't become passive. You become available for divine action. Instead of forcing solutions based on limited human understanding, you allow infinite intelligence to work through you with perfect timing and wisdom. The ego equates effort with effectiveness, but divine consciousness accomplishes more through one moment of true surrender than years of human struggle. This isn't laziness. It's the ultimate efficiency of allowing life to live itself through you perfectly. Some people worry that this teaching promotes spiritual materialism in reverse. using non-attachment as another technique to get what you want. They practice the Great Nothingness, hoping to manipulate God into giving them better demonstrations. Goldsmith warned against this trap. True non-attachment doesn't care about demonstrations. You don't practice divine indifference to get healthier, wealthier, or happier. You practice it because it reveals your true nature beyond all conditions. The moment you use these principles as techniques to achieve better human experiences, you've missed the point entirely. This teaching isn't about improving your human life. It's about recognizing that your real life was never human to begin with. The paradox is that when you truly stop caring about demonstrations, they happen naturally. But if you stop caring in order to get demonstrations, you're still trapped in spiritual materialism. The freedom must be genuine, not strategic. The ultimate challenge is learning to live this understanding in a world that operates on completely opposite principles. Your family, friends, and society will pressure you to worry, struggle, and strive. They'll think you've become irresponsible or delusional. Goldsmith faced this challenge constantly. People expected him to be concerned about their problems, to pray for specific outcomes, to participate in the human drama of lack and limitation. Instead, he offered something far more radical: the recognition of perfection right where problems seem to exist. You'll need courage to stand in this truth when everyone around you is convinced that problems are real and effort is necessary. You'll be tempted to doubt yourself when others question your sanity. This is where spiritual maturity becomes essential. Remember, you're not trying to convince anyone or prove anything. You're simply living from the recognition of what you are. Let your peace, your freedom, and your natural demonstrations speak for themselves. Truth doesn't need to be defended, only embodied. If these challenge-breaking techniques speak to your heart, like to support this content, subscribe for advanced spiritual practices, and comment, which obstacle are you ready to transform now? Advanced practitioners learn to apply this teaching to seemingly impossible situations. Terminal illness, bankruptcy, broken relationships, addiction, areas where human hope has been exhausted, and medical or professional help has failed. Jennifer was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Doctors gave her 3 months to live. Instead of fighting the disease or praying for healing, she practiced the Great Nothingness. She stopped identifying as a cancer patient and began recognizing herself as perfect spiritual being. The process wasn't easy. Fear would arise, and she'd have to release it into the nothingness. Well-meaning friends would encourage her to fight, and she'd have to maintain her spiritual stance without judging their concern. She lived each day from the recognition that consciousness cannot have cancer. After 8 months, scans showed no trace of cancer. But Jennifer had discovered something more valuable than physical healing: the absolute conviction that her true identity was untouchable by any condition. She'd found freedom beyond all circumstances. David had been addicted to alcohol for 20 years. Multiple rehab attempts had failed. His family had given up, his career was destroyed, and he was living on the streets. Traditional recovery methods focused on fighting addiction, but this approach had only strengthened his sense of being an addict. When he learned Goldsmith's teaching, something clicked. Instead of seeing himself as an addict trying to get sober, he began practicing the recognition that consciousness cannot be addicted to anything. His true self had never touched alcohol because spirit has no material experience. The craving didn't disappear immediately, but his relationship to it transformed. Instead of fighting urges or feeling guilty about them, he recognized them as thoughts arising in consciousness. Not his thoughts, not his urges, just temporary appearances in awareness. Over time, the compulsion simply faded, not through willpower or 12-step programs, but through the recognition that the person who drank never actually existed. Only consciousness exists, appearing as David, forever free from all material dependencies. Patricia's business was failing during the economic crisis. Clients were disappearing, bills were mounting, and bankruptcy seemed inevitable. Traditional business advice focused on marketing harder, cutting costs, and finding new revenue streams, all forms of human effort based on the belief that she needed to save her business. Instead, she applied Goldsmith's teaching to her professional life. She stopped seeing herself as a struggling businesswoman and began recognizing herself as consciousness expressing as perfect supply. She released every thought about saving, improving, or growing her business. This felt irresponsible at first. Shouldn't she be working harder to find solutions? But she persisted in practicing divine indifference to business outcomes while continuing to show up and serve with love, without attachment to results. Within months, new opportunities appeared effortlessly. Clients returned with larger projects. New partnerships formed naturally. Her business not only survived, but thrived, demonstrating that divine intelligence is far more effective than human planning when allowed to operate freely. The most advanced application of this teaching involves relationships and family dynamics. Robert's adult son had been estranged for 5 years following a bitter argument. Traditional advice focused on communication strategies, apologies, and rebuilding trust, all human efforts based on the belief that the relationship was broken. Robert practiced seeing through the appearance of estrangement to the spiritual reality of perfect love that eternally connects him and his son. Instead of trying to fix the relationship, he recognized that consciousness doesn't have relationship problems, because consciousness is one. He stopped seeing his son as someone who needed forgiveness and stopped seeing himself as someone who needed to be forgiven. He released every hope for reconciliation and every fear of permanent separation, resting in the truth that love cannot actually be broken. The reconciliation happened naturally when his son called out of nowhere, unable to explain why his anger had suddenly dissolved. They reunited not as a father and son who had healed their problems, but as expressions of one consciousness recognizing itself. After decades of practicing these principles, something profound emerges. What Goldsmith called the natural state. You stop being someone who practices spiritual principles and become someone who lives from spiritual identity naturally, effortlessly, continuously. Problems still appear in experience, but they don't disturb your peace. Challenges arise, but they don't shake your confidence in the perfection of consciousness. You've learned to rest in the eye of every storm, untouched by the conditions swirling around you. This isn't spiritual bypassing or denial. You respond appropriately to human situations while maintaining awareness of spiritual reality. You can visit the hospital, pay the bills, and work through conflicts while never losing sight of the perfect consciousness that's actually governing everything. The Great Nothingness becomes your natural dwelling place. Divine indifference becomes your automatic response. Conscious union becomes your permanent identity. You've not achieved something new. You've simply stopped forgetting what you always were. Others begin noticing something different about you, though they may not be able to identify what. Your presence brings peace to chaotic situations. Your calm confidence inspires others without you trying to help. Your natural joy lifts the atmosphere wherever you go. You've become what Goldsmith called a transparency for divine consciousness. Your human personality no longer blocks the expression of infinite love, wisdom, and power. Life lives itself through you with perfect grace, touching everyone you encounter with healing energy. This isn't personal achievement or spiritual superiority. It's simply the natural result of getting out of consciousness's way. When the human sense of self stops interfering with divine expression, miracles become ordinary. Love flows freely. Wisdom speaks spontaneously. Power operates effortlessly. You realize this was always your true nature. The years of seeking, struggling, and striving were just consciousness playing hide-and-seek with itself. Now the game is over. The seeker and the sought are recognized as one. Only consciousness remains, expressing as perfect experience. The ripple effects extend beyond your personal experience. Family members begin experiencing spontaneous healing and breakthroughs without understanding why. Colleagues find themselves more creative and successful. Strangers feel mysteriously uplifted after brief encounters with you. This is the true power of Goldsmith's final teaching. It transforms not just your experience, but everyone in your consciousness. When you recognize your true identity, that recognition lifts the entire field of awareness in which you exist. You're not trying to heal others or save the world. You're simply being what you are, consciousness itself expressing as individual awareness. This authentic being automatically blesses everything it touches because consciousness is inherently blessing. The teaching completes itself. You've moved beyond needing techniques, practices, or principles. You simply live from the direct recognition of divine being, allowing that recognition to express itself naturally as perfect human experience, moment by moment by moment. This is Joel Goldsmith's most dangerous teaching because it ends all seeking, dissolves all problems, and reveals the truth that was never hidden. You are not a human being having spiritual experiences. You are a spiritual being expressing as human awareness. The Great Nothingness isn't something you do, it's what you are when you stop doing everything else. Divine indifference isn't an attitude you adopt, it's your natural state when human desires and fears dissolve. Conscious union isn't an achievement, it's the recognition of what never began. Most people aren't ready for this level of truth because it demands the complete surrender of everything they believe about themselves, God, and life. It requires the courage to live as consciousness itself, not as someone trying to use consciousness for personal benefit. But for those ready to receive it, this teaching offers the ultimate freedom, liberation from every form of human suffering through the simple recognition of what you have always been. Perfect, eternal, untouchable divine being, expressing as your individual experience right now. If your spiritual understanding expanded through these Joel Goldsmith secrets, like this video, subscribe for more transformative teachings, and comment, "I am transformed," to confirm your new path.